Good morning everyone, let's dig into the new Mega Mothership Celestial Odyssey palette which was released for Holiday 2021 from Pat McGrath Labs. Before we dig into that though, let me give credit where credit is due, because I started each and every one of my reviews for the past year with a rant about Pat's non-existent express shipping. She has finally pulled it off. I ordered the palette literally the minute it released for VIP early access, and then I received a shipping notification on Monday evening, and yesterday on Wednesday it was already in my house. So by this point I am truly convinced that the rate limiting factor with her express shipping and her shipping in general is the fact that they just take forever to actually ship out the product, because once it has been shipped out, DHL Express delivers it really quickly. I'm very curious, for those of you who have ordered with her free shipping, how quickly it will take for you, because I heard from some of you that you have already gotten shipping notifications much quicker than usual, and I heard from others that that has not been as fast. So there seems to be a lot of variability there, so I'm very curious. But personally I'm very happy that finally she pulled off express shipping, so much so that when the quads and the blushes and the highlighters released yesterday, I placed my order for the 2 quads and the highlighter, and I chickened out. I talked in my previous video that I may have tried her free shipping, but I chickened out and I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to do the express shipping, because I don't want to fuck around with waiting for a month just in case this was a fluke. I am going to do live swatches with you. We're going to do a quick look, and then I'm going to also do a bunch of comparison swatches and give you somewhat of my final thoughts on the actual eyeshadow palette and the color story and how I feel about my very first impression, because this is only going to be a first impression, it's not going to be a full-blown review. Stick around for next week though, because I am going to do a week of a Celestial Odyssey. I'm just going to come back every day and do a look with you and post those as soon as possible, so that you get a pretty good idea of what this palette can do and what its limitations are. As you guys know, this palette retails for $78, just like the Celestial Divinity palette did last year. I'm very sorry I cannot compare this palette to the Celestial Divinity for you, because I did not buy Celestial Divinity, because I already have one of the Star Wars quads, the Star Wars 6 pans, and in fact, even though I didn't buy it, I am going to have the C-3PO 6 pan as well. So it wasn't really worth it for me to buy the whole palette just for a couple of new shades. I think my obsession with Pat McGrath has reached truly new levels this year, because I think maybe this year I would have bought the Celestial Divinity, but last year I was still someone with the sane mind and I did not purchase it, so I can't make the comparison for you. But from what I understand, last year's palette was pretty much in the same format, quite big, cardboard, and it was fully cardboard, which I have no problem with. I don't mind cardboard packaging at all. So let's take a look at the packaging of this one. It comes in a corresponding box, and this is how the palette looks like. Honestly, I think it is really beautiful, really festive, just gorgeous standard Pat McGrath packaging. When you open it, it has 2 ribbons here that will hold it propped up in case you want to put it on your vanity and hold it propped up like that. It comes with 18 shades, there's a huge mirror in there, and I only have one question for Pat. Why was this necessary? I'm going to leave it at that. In comparison to last year, this year there is the black lacquer, base that you also see in her big Mothership palettes, which gives a little bit more of that luxurious feeling, but overall everything else is cardboard. But honestly, the palette feels really sturdy, really beautifully made. On the back you have the shade name. It features a variety of different formulas. You have mattes, you have satin shimmers, you have foiled metallics, and a formula that I think is new to Pat McGrath's collection, which is the 24 karat duochrome sparkle. There are a couple of those in here, so I'm going to point those out when we swatch them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to swatch in rows starting from here. So I'm going to swatch the first row, then I'm going to swatch the second row, then I'm going to swatch the third row. So we have Saturn Sunset, which is a really beautiful mauvey, purpley, reddy matte. Then we have the shade Rose Venus, which is a foiled metallic, and it is actually a repeat in case you have her single eyeshadows, like her single idols. This shade was never part of a palette. Then we have the shade Gold Galaxy, which is a foiled metallic. Then we have Noir Moon, which I'm really not sure what the finish of this is, but it looks like a dark base that is loaded with like green and blue and maybe purple sparkles. Then we have the shade Bronze Nova, and Bronze Nova is one of those 24 karat duochrome sparkle shades. And finally we have the shade Nocturne, which is a very deep brown matte shade. Off the bat I can tell you, this is not the same formula that was featured in her Voyeuristic Vixen quad, so the shade Rosefire Nectar, which is also a new formula from her, a little bit more of like that very flaky, very impactful shade. This is not like that. This feels a little bit flaky, but when you apply it, it's actually quite smooth, and there is a little bit of like a peachy pink, gold, green duochrome to it. So it is a beautiful shade, but I don't think it's as impactful as I expected. I thought this would be like super flaky and impactful. So starting off the second row, we have the shades Galactic Glow, which is like a super boring champagne shade. Then we have the shade Sunset Amber, which is a gorgeous, slightly like camel toned brown. I'm really excited for this shade. Then we have the shade Lotus Luxe, which I believe is a repeat from her Golden Opulus 6-pan, which I don't have. So this is like a very like deep reddish rosy pink metallic shade. Then we have this really beautiful shade called Lunar Haze, which is a foiled metallic, and it looks like a taupe lavender. Then we have this shade Electric, which is a matte, and it looks like a petal pink neutral sort of color, and I think this is a very unique and very beautiful shade. And finally we have another one of those 24 karat duochrome sparkles. This is the shade Heavenly Body, which looks to be like a very interesting rosy shade with a little bit of a, I want to say, golden sparkle to it, or at least it looks like that. Again, the shade feels very flaky, but when you go out to swatch it, it applies quite smoothly in my opinion, and I don't think the duochrome effect is very evident. Alright you guys, last row of shades, we have the shade Bronze Eclipse, which is a repeat shade from Midnight Sun. It's a beautiful, like bronzy brown foiled metallic shade. Then we have the satin shimmer called Solar Flare, which is a little bit of your peachy pink gold duochrome. Then we have the shade Nirvana, which is a teal blue. Then we have the shade Corrupt Copper, which is another repeat in case you have her single idols. It's never been in a palette before, but it's a gorgeous shade. I also have that one as a single. Then we have the shade Palladium, which is a gorgeous like neutral taupey shade. And finally, in the worst possible spot you can imagine, right on my elbow, I swatched the most exciting shade from this palette for a lot of people, the shade Citrine Envy, which is this gorgeous like green gold duochrome, which is also one of her 24 karat duochrome sparkle shades. Again, very beautiful, very sparkly, but it definitely isn't as duochrome as you would expect. My arm is starting to hurt like a motherfucker, so I'm going to give you one last glance of the swatches and then we're going to do the look. So here you have swatches of the whole Celestial Odyssey Mega Mothership palette. So for today's look, I think I'm going to do something that is a little bit more of like a neutral with a pop of green, because I really want to utilize the green in one way or another. I wanted to recommend to all of you to go watch Kara from Beauty and the Frizzes video on this palette, because she did a really beautiful look with like the more like blue, teal, spectrum of the shades, which is not something I'm going to do right now today, but if you would like to see a really beautiful look with those shades, I would recommend going to her channel. Now, the first shade that I am going to go into, actually the first two shades are going to be the Camel Light Brown shade and the Deep Brown, and I'm going to lay those in my crease and in my outer corner, as you would expect. So far, my impression of this eyeshadow palette in terms of the color story is that we can't really speak of much of a color story. There's really pretty much everything on the rainbow. There's the golds, the blues, the greens, I think purple. Well, there is the lavender shade, so there is also a little bit of purple here. I feel like last year's palette was a little bit more jewel toned and a bit deeper in its tones, whereas this one is a little bit lighter in tone and maybe a little bit easier to use for people who want more daytime friendly looks. So with that said, I don't think there's much of a color story here other than there you have it, all the colors, enjoy. Then I'm going to grab a smaller pencil type brush and I'm going to go into the deeper brown shade. Deep brown shades are something that Pat has given us a lot of, so I'm sure this will be extremely similar but just slightly different from things we already own. So I don't expect, you know, anything there in terms of newness and uniqueness. But this is a very useful shade to have in a palette like this, because you do need a deeper neutral shade when you're going to do your more brown looks. And there is that sparkly black type shade which you can utilize if you want an actual black in your outer corner, because these types of shades usually can be blended out really well despite the sparkles. So I'm just giving this a light blend over here. Okay, now I'm going to apply the Intensifies wand, which is one of her newest releases. It is her version of a glitter glue, but then in a stick format. I usually apply mine just using my finger, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to apply the stick on the moving part of my lid and inner corners, where I'm going to apply the more sparkly shades. I will say though, I feel like this palette is missing a little bit of a wow factor in terms of like true duochromatic shades, because the few shades that are in there as marketed as duochromes are very like subtle duochromes. Okay, I'm going to now do a little bit of layering. You know what, this palette is really hard to hold up, so I'm just going to tell you what I'm going to do now. I'm going to take this shade, the shade Palladium, all over my lid. Then I'm going to apply this shade over top of that. I'm going to layer this one, the 24 karat duochrome sparkle, that's the shade Bronze Nova, and these are going to be my lid shade. And then I'm going to put Citrine Envy in my inner corner, so I'm going to just take my finger and apply the shade Palladium all over the eyelid, like so. Leave that inner corner free for Citrine Envy. You can see this shade has like neutral, more cooler leaning tones, and I would like to bring a little bit more warmth and, you know, a little bit of something interesting to it, which is why I'm going to now layer the duochrome sparkle over top of that. I think that's going to look really bomb. And that's the beauty of Pat McGrath's eyeshadow formula, that her, you know, her textures layer so beautifully. Now I'm going to take a little shader brush like this one and go into the shade Citrine Envy. By the way, I've noticed that a bunch of people who live in the US have gotten Citrine Envy shattered in their palettes, and honestly I feel like there's something wrong with the people who like deliver your packages, because I've never ever received a broken package. I say, and probably my next one is going to be broken, but I've never received anything broken from Pat McGrath Labs. So whoever is like treating your packages in the US, I feel like is treating them like a Neanderthal. Okay, this shade is so beautiful. It is so beautiful. It's going to look super dope on the lid, and we're definitely going to try that during our week of Celestial Odyssey. But for today, in the inner corner, I think it looks stunning. Alright, on my lower lash line, I'm going to now first apply my little stick again from Pat McGrath. I'm going to shove it right here because I want the eyeshadows to be able to stick. So what I'm going to do now is towards the outer part of my lower lash line, I'm going to take this shade. This is Gold Galaxy No, it's not Gold Galaxy, it's Noir Moon. So on the outer part of my lower lash line, I'm going to take Noir Moon, the very sparkly black base shade, and towards the middle portion of my lower lash line, I'm going to take this teal shade, the shade Nirvana, and that is going to complete our first look with the Celestial Odyssey palette. I'm going to try to be very careful when I apply this shade, and just keep it more concentrated here on the outer edge of the eye. And I'm first going to lay down both shades, and then I'm going to do a bit of blending. I'm sure you are dying to know how this shade, the shade Nirvana, compares to Lapis Luxury. I will show you later, but spoiler alert, Lapis Luxury is so much more blue compared to this, which leans more green. I felt like I was wearing the wrong shade of lipstick because it was a little bit too pink leaning, and I wanted something a little bit more brown leaning. So I think this lip feels much more cohesive with the look. And when it comes to the eye look, fuck yeah, I love how this turned out. It is so beautiful. The shade Citrine Envy is absolutely glorious. I cannot wait to bask in its full glory when I put it all over my eyelids. But I think, yeah, my first impression so far with this look, everything that I've ever expected from Pat McGrath, which is sheer perfection. She always exceeds my expectations. I'm always almost slightly underwhelmed when I see the promo teasers, images of her releases, and then when I receive them, I'm always blown away by the quality and how beautiful everything is, and this is no exception. You are going to see me in a different outfit for the next portion of the video because I do not have time to film that today, but if you would like to see comparison swatches of a bunch of the eyeshadows from this palette compared to previous releases, then please stick around. And if not, then I'll see you in my next video during the Celestial Mega Mothership week, which we're going to have next week on my channel. Okay, you guys, I'm ready for some comparison swatches. The look that I'm wearing today was created with this palette. It's going to come probably already on Sunday. So let's get started. The first thing I actually want to do is I want to compare the two idols that I have that are featured in this palette to the formulas in the palette, because I already have the shades Corrupt Copper and Rose Venus as single eyeshadows, and these are present in the palette, and I want to swatch them against the ones that are present in the palette and compare the formulas a little bit. Here we have Corrupt Copper, here we have Rose Venus, and now I'm going to swatch the corresponding shades from the Celestial Odyssey palette. Rose Venus feels very, very soft, just like the single does. And so does Corrupt Copper. So here we have Corrupt Copper, and here we have Rose Venus. Surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, because this can happen, that there can be slight variations in the formulas, I actually feel like the two shades from the Celestial Odyssey palette are a little bit more saturated and more punchy compared to the two singles. Another comparison that I'm dying to make is between the shade Gold Galaxy, which is the gold over here, compared to the shade Gold Standard, which we have seen come back in several different releases, including the Decadence palette, the Metamorphosis 6-pan, and I want to open my Metamorphosis 6-pan because there's another shade in here that I want to do a comparison with in a little bit. But let's compare the shade Gold Standard, which is one of Mother's OG golds. The only difference that I see very, very clearly is that this is a little bit deeper and this is a little bit more yellow in tone. So let's swatch here Gold Standard. And let's swatch here Gold Galaxy from the new palette. You can see that they are quite similar, yet not quite the same thing. If anything, I would say if you were not a huge fan of Gold Standard because you found it to be too yellow toned, you might like Gold Galaxy more because it seems to be more neutral and somewhat deeper in tone and not as yellowed. And because I have the Metamorphosis eyeshadow palette already opened, I want to compare to the shade in here that I feel like is at least in the same spirit, or at least it has the same inspiration source. This is the shade Palladium over here, and there is a shade in the 6-pan Metamorphosis palette, which I actually featured recently in one of my pet pairing videos, and that is this shade over here, that is the shade Metallurgy. So here you have palladium, here you have metallurgy. I think palladium is definitely more taupe, whereas metallurgy has a bit more of like slight golden tones to it. So let's watch metallurgy from Metamorphosis first. This is a very unique shade. I really love this shade. And here we have the shade Palladium from the new palette. They are actually quite similar, but I think this has more golden tones and this has deeper, more almost like taupe tones to it. I'm going to move on to another eyeshadow palette. And the eyeshadow palette that I would like to get into is the Decadence palette. So the Decadence palette was one that featured pretty much only like a satin shimmer, like 2 satin shimmers and foiled metallic shades. And the shades I want to compare in here are absolutely this shade over here, the shade Lapis Luxury, and I do want to swatch this neutral shade next to Palladium, and maybe swatch this one out next to a Lotus Luxe. So let's start off with this shade because I have already Palladium on my arm as it is. I don't think they're going to be very similar. I think this is probably even more cool toned, but let's find out. So this is the shade from Decadence. Yes, they're all like neutral tones, but on the spectrum of warmth, this is the warmest one and this is the most cool toned one. Now let's make a comparison that I feel like is going to be very interesting, and that is between Lapis Luxury in the Decadence palette and the shade Nirvana over here in the Celestial Odyssey palette. So here is Lapis Luxury, here is Nirvana, and I don't know whether you can already tell from just my finger that Lapis Luxury is actually so much more blue. So here we have Lapis, and here we have Nirvana. They're both extremely rich in tone, extremely saturated, but you can clearly see that this is so much more blue and this is so much more of like that beautiful sea foam, like teal green blue. It is absolutely beautiful. And last but not least, I don't think they're going to be anything like each other, but let's swatch the shade Lotus Luxe, which was part of also her Golden Opulence. So this is this shade over here, the more like pinky red, next to the shade, I want to say this is Inferno from the Decadence palette. So here we have the shade from Decadence, which has a beautiful like copper flip to it. It's a red with a copper flip to it. And here we have Lotus Luxe, and you can definitely tell how much more pink and like yeah, it's just more pink. Now a really interesting comparison that I wanted to make for you, just for the sake of showing you that they're quite different from each other and that Citrine Envy is quite a unique tone of green in Pat's collection. I want to swatch Citrine Envy up against the gorgeous VR Emerald from Nocturnal Nirvana. Like, don't look at the VR Emerald shade as in like a duochrome, because they are completely different duochromes, but I wanted to compare the green overlay for you. So this is Citrine Envy, this is VR Emerald. So let's watch VR Emerald first over here. Oh no, sorry, this is Citrine Envy. Okay, Citrine Envy, and this is VR Emerald. And you can tell immediately how much more golden in tone the shade Citrine Envy is. The golden duochrome really comes through when you compare it to the more like forest green, jewel green, emerald green undertone that can be seen in VR Emerald. Okay, the next eyeshadow palette that I'm opening over here is my Risque Rose Quad, and there are two shades I want to compare. I want to compare the deep matte to the deep matte in Odyssey, and I want to swatch this shade, the shade Life on Mars, compared to one of the 24 karat sparkles that are to be found in Odyssey. So let me show you the shades that I'm referring to. I am referring to this brown shade and this 24 karat sparkle shade. So here we have Odyssey, and here we have Risque Rose. there is like a very slight variation in their undertone, but overall I would say they both would probably do the job for like a deep brown shade. So I already thought we've seen a shade like this from Pat before. That said, you know, when you look at the color story of Celestial Odyssey, you do need a deep matte brown shade, so why not have something that is similar to the one in Risky Rose. Now I'm going to swatch Life on Mars next to the 24 karat sparkle shade from Pat, which is called Heavenly Body. Wasn't there like a Met Gala that was themed Heavenly Bodies? Anyway, so these are the two shades. This is the shade from, this is Life on Mars, and this is the new shade. You can already see the texture of this shade is completely different, because it's that like chunkier 24 karat formula. So let's go here, Life on Mars, which is one of my, oh, you know what, I think I had a bunch of brown left on my finger, so now you're also seeing a little bit of a brown trail here. I'm very, very sorry. This is Life on Mars, and here we have the sparkle shade from the new palette. This is a bit lighter in tone, and it has a little bit of that golden duochrome to it, but I feel like the tones of the two shades are very, very similar to each other. They might look very nice when they're layered together. Next we have the Eternal Eden quad, and there are, I think, maybe one shade or two shades that I want to swatch two shades in here. So let's start with the shimmery shade, so this like peachy pink over here, which I want to compare to the shade Solar Flare, which is this one here from the Celestial Odyssey palette. Okay, you can clearly see the shade from Eternal Eden has a more pink base, and this definitely has a more peach base, the one from Odyssey. Let's swatch them side by side. So here you've got the shade from the Eternal Eden quad. It's a very light pink with like a golden duochrome to it. And here you have Solar Flare, which is actually the same formula. It's like that more satin shimmery formula, but this has a much more peach gold undertone, whereas this has a more pinky gold undertone. The next one I want to swatch is this warm toned matte pink over here from the Eternal Eden quad, up against one of the mattes in the Celestial Odyssey eyeshadow palette, and that is this one over here, which I believe is called Electric. The one in Eternal Eden again is more pink, and this one is more peach. So we have Eternal Eden over here, and mattes are a nightmare to swatch, and this is the new shade from Celestial Odyssey. I already was quite a fan of this shade because it has warmer pink tones to it, but I prefer this one even more because it has more like warm peach tones to it. So another very important comparison that I want to make for you is with the Vixen, Voyeuristic Vixen quad, and I want to swatch this absolutely glorious shade over here. This is the shade Rosefire Nectar, which I believe is a new formula that we've seen from Pat, and one that I have not really seen repeated in another eyeshadow palette from her. And I want to compare this shade to another one that I felt like reminded me of it, but in a more subdued finish, and that is this one over here, the shade Bronze Nova, which is one of the 24 karat sparkles. So here you have the shade from the Voyeuristic Vixen quad. Again, they're not the same shade, but they are, I feel like, very similar in inspiration. So here you have the shade from Voyeuristic Vixen, and here you have Bronze Nova. So what I would say is that Bronze Nova is the more subtle version of Rosefire Nectar. Rosefire Nectar is just punchier in terms of its impact. It's more foiled, more metallic, more flaky, whereas this one has the same like shifty tones to it, but because the formula is not as flaky, and because the tones are a little bit more subdued, it's just a more subdued version of this eyeshadow. Next I want to be digging into the new Utopian Dream Mothership palette, because I feel like I want to swatch at least this shade and this shade against some of the shades. Oh yeah, maybe this shade as well. Here you have the coral shade from Utopian Dream, and here you have the pinky shade from the Celestial Odyssey palette. And in case you were curious, I don't think they're going to be similar whatsoever, but because we have the Utopian Dream palette open, let's swatch this shade over here, the light pink shade, also next to the shade from Celestial Odyssey. so you can see the differences in all the tones. So to me these shades are similar in tone, so the shade from Utopian Dream and the shade from Celestial Odyssey, but this is just more coral, more punchy and more vibrant, whereas this is more subdued and more of like a darker pink shade. And I again prefer this one slightly more than I prefer this one, although I think this one has its place when you use it for like a really fiery and vibrant look in the summer months. Okay, next I want to swatch this peachy pink duochrome here from the Utopian Dream palette, again up against another shade that I already swatched in here, but I want to swatch again, and that is the 24 karat here in the very outer edge, the shade Heavenly Body. Why can I not remember that? So here we have the shade from Utopia, and here we have the shade from the new palette. Okay, they're quite different. This is much deeper in tone, and this is much more, this is much lighter in tone. I actually really like this shade, the shade Heavenly Body. Okay, I don't want to go overboard with the comparison swatches, so I'm just going to do one more, and that is going to be the comparison between this brown, bronzy shade from Utopian Dream up against this shade. What is it called again? The shade here, Bronze Eclipse. And just FYI, Bronze Eclipse was in Midnight Sun, and I forgot to do that comparison when we were doing Utopian Dream, so let's just go for it now. So we have the bronze from Utopian Dream next to the Bronze Eclipse shade from Celestial Odyssey / Midnight Sun. So this is much more coppery, this is much more like a golden brown in tone. There you have it, a ton of comparison swatches for you to get an idea where we stand with the Celestial Odyssey palette when it comes to similar-ish shades. Are there similar-ish shades? Absolutely. Are they still different? They are. Pat made sure that she created unique shades for the Celestial Odyssey palette, and whatever was repeated was just truly a repeat shade that she has released before. Now, my first overall thoughts on this eyeshadow palette, after I have used it actually twice by now, there's a little bit for everyone in here. There are warm tones, there are cool tones, there are jewel tones, there are fiery tones. What I feel like is something that is pretty obvious with this palette is that you are getting more subtle formulas. Subtle in the sense of like metallic impact and super shimmery shades. I don't think you're getting much of that in the Celestial Odyssey palette. With that said, Pat's formulas are very saturated, very impactful, very pigmented, so you are getting very vibrant shades. They're just not going to be super sparkly and duochromy.
Now we're
Are you here again? Are you here again?
Now we're from a sponsor, NordVPN. Also, Raid Shadow Legends. Please like, share, subscribe, and hit that bell.
Okay, this was the absolute perfect exit to this video. Thank you so much for watching. These are all of my first impressions about this palette. Like I said, stay tuned for the week of Celestial Odyssey to create a bunch of looks with it. Let me know what you thought about everything that was said in the past, probably half an hour at least. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see each other again on Sunday for the creation of this look. Bye!